Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs.
Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I'm going to try to do a little bit shorter podcast this week. I've been running a little long the past couple ones, but there's been a lot to discuss. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, it was the 100th episode, and yeah, that one went over an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. I just cut it into two parts and edited it down quite a bit because I was answering, listener questions, and I enjoyed doing it. It was fun, but I know y'all don't necessarily have the time to sit here and listen to me talk for much more than you have to. So let's just get started here. Really, the feedback on the new cookbook has been fantastic. I am so pleased that people are enjoying it. And if you haven't gotten your copy yet, please either buy it directly from me. The link's on my blog, southernappalachianherbs.blogspot.com. You can get the PDF, or you can get whatever version of it you want from Amazon. Amazon has it in print, hard copy, paperback, or they have their Kindle and all those different e-reader devices. If you haven't gotten your copy, I highly recommend you do so because, as I said, people are really enjoying this book. They also seem to have enjoyed last week when I gave a recipe out of the book. So I'm going to try to do just a brief uh, how-to on one of those essential kitchen techniques that will make your food so much better and so much healthier and so much more enjoyable. And it's really very simple, and it's also a way to be less wasteful with food. I'm a very big advocate of not wasting food. Honestly, I think the better the cook, the less food is wasted. I do not have a lot of scraps coming out of my kitchen at all. The only reason I think my grandmother ever had any scraps going out of her kitchen was some of them were treats for the animals, the pigs, the horses, the goats, chickens. And if there sometimes there are meat and bone scraps, for the dogs and such. She'd actually make bread, cornbread, and soak it in some meat broth to help stretch out the dog's food. And there'd be leftover rice and maybe some leftover grits or something. And she could have utilized those in other dishes, but there were animals that would have enjoyed it, and it was a way to cut down on the cost of feed. And I still do that, certainly, but I like to utilize as much as possible. And then when it's really given its all, it goes to the compost. After we discuss that, the herb for today is one that's really in season right now. It's one you can get out right now and harvest and find. Now is the time of year where you're going to notice it growing everywhere, and really it's getting into the time of the year where you're going to need it. It's goldenrod. Yes, the goldenrod that many people blame for allergies is actually a very powerful herb, very good for you. It makes actually very tasty tea. And, the truth is, goldenrod's probably not what's causing your fall allergies. It's just what you see mostly out there. Very few people are actually allergic to goldenrod. What most people are actually allergic to is the ragweed that's lurking behind the goldenrod. And right now is very much ragweed season. So let's talk about the food first, and then we'll have our herb for dessert. So In recent years, the concept of bone broth has become a real fad. I mean, I guess the past decade, bone broth has been the big thing. And it's really, I have no problem with bone broth. It's very good for you, and you should certainly be using it and all that. I have an issue with the naming of bone broth. It's confusing in culinary terms. It's really more of a symptom of our culinary ignorance, our lack of knowledge of cooking in modern times. You see, traditionally, bones or say shrimp shells or such as that, hard, inedible items from the critters were boiled, and that's called stock. Vegetables and herbs go into stock as well. Bones or shellfish shells, whatever, are stock. Broth is meat, vegetables, herbs, etc., boiled. That simple difference. So for the last, 500 years or so in culinary terms, stock has been boiled bones and broth has been boiled meat. So you can see where I kind of have an issue with the term bone broth. I really think, after half a century or so of people buying broth in a can and not really using stocks, it just became more convenient marketing to call it bone broth instead of simply stock, which it is. It's stock. And stocks are really essential for the kitchen. Again, for hundreds of years, the stock pot has been on the back of the stove. And that stock pot is the way you cut down on kitchen waste. It's the way you make wonderful, healthy soups and wonderful sauces. The stock itself is a key component. Taking the most humble ingredients and making those rich, fancy French sauces. Take for instance a demi-glace. Demi-glace is just simply stock simmered down until it becomes a glaze, until it literally becomes almost like a thick syrup. That is something, if you eat in a restaurant, well, one, it's going to blow your mind because it's the most concentrated flavor of richness and meat. Um, it's going to be included, whether it's the stock or it's a demi-glaze or somewhere in between, in so many sauces. So many sauces, from a simple gravy to a sauce espagnole to a sauce chauffeur or hunter sauce. So many. Dozens and really, like Escaffier's old French cookbook from the early 1800s. I think he had like 300 sauces in there. 300 sauces, and probably more than that. This is just off the top of my head. In fact, I think if you included salad dressings and other things we might think of as a sauce today, you're probably getting to more to like 500 sauces. And probably 75% of them started with basic stock. The others are based on cream or milk, eggs, whatever. But so stock is foundational. Now, what is a stock? Stock is where we take bones and boil them in water for a long period of time. Well, obviously, one of the greatest things about making stock is you put all your vegetable scraps in there as well. And all your vegetable scraps that are not beginning to rot. Anything you trim off. It can be the top of a carrot. It can be onion skins, the ends of onion that you don't want to eat, peels and tops of tomatoes. Eat all vegetable scraps, even the papery peeling that comes off of garlic or shallot. Save it. Get your bones, and these days I know the modern kitchen doesn't butcher a lot of meat. Now I absolutely love butchering meat. It's something I've grown up doing. It's something I enjoy, and I don't mean it in a ghoulish way. What I mean is, I love to take a good piece of meat, a nice big cut, and I do what's called seam butchery. I separate the muscles where they join. This is old-fashioned butchery. It's the way people used to do it. Nowadays you go to the store and they're just cutting everything up with bandsaws, and it's not the art of butchery. With the art of butchery, you understand every single muscle on the animal. You cut them apart the way you want. Sometimes you do want to cut across. Sometimes if you want a nice chop or something, you will use a saw. and you will cut through like two different muscles, like let's say a T-bone or a porterhouse, really two of my favorite steaks, really. Um, you got the loin there, and you've got the strip, like on a T-bone. You've got the loin and the strip, both cuts on the same steak, right? So sometimes you do want to do that. For the most part, though, you're literally taking the animal part a muscle at a time. And by doing that, you really learn the taste and quality of each individual cut. You can trim off the silver skin. You can take off as much fat as you want or leave on as much fat as you don't, all the gristle and everything. You really giving a lot of respect to the animal, and it makes for a much better meal. You're going to get a much better quality of meat if you butcher it yourself. If you butcher your meat yourself, you have a lot of bones. And really, the other aspect of butchering the meat yourself is you kind of see I guess, the wonder of God's creation. You see how this animal was put together, and I mean that's pretty cool, actually. It gives you a whole new respect for your food, and really the a sense of wonder. I guess you can put it that way, that's maybe you won't get into that, but it is something that I've always found very interesting, and one of the reasons I like to do my own butchering. But like I said, the other reason is quality, and the third reason is so I have the bones. And organ meats. I mean, I love liver and kidneys and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, if you don't have access to bones, if you don't have large cuts of beef, if you're not a hunter and you don't have deer that you're breaking down, you can go to the grocery store. You can buy what's called soup bones. Okay, not every grocery store will have this. You're probably gonna have to look around. It used to be so common. You could go up to your butcher counter and you could say, "I want so many pounds of beef shin." That's usually the cut that's used. It's called beef shin. It's nice big bones with a little bit of meat still on there, not much meat, and really the only fat in it is the marrow. The marrow itself is fatty. Around here, there's only one grocery store I can get soup buns from. So when I have to buy them, I do, and they're not very expensive. They come frozen in a bag. I think it's like 3 pounds, maybe 5 pounds for $3. I mean, it's pretty cheap, right? Take those bones and take them and put them on a pan and roast them in the oven. Roast all your vegetable scraps along with it. Let everything get nice and brown. You're going to put this in like a 400-degree oven for like an hour. I mean, you're just going to put it in and roast it nicely. Okay. Now, if you're using things like, the onion skins and garlic skins, you probably don't want to roast them the whole time. Kind of put them in toward the end, or you can even just hold those back and throw them into the stock pot as they are. But if you let them brown up a little bit, they're going to have a lot more flavor. As those bones roast, that marrow will become liquefied. That marrow is actually quite delicious. It's you can make a marrow butter if you want to. You can take that marrow and mix it with butter and maybe some chives, and it makes an absolutely wonderful topping for a steak. You can actually just take bread and dip it right in the marrow and eat it, or scoop out the marrow and spread it on bread. Absolutely delicious, absolutely packed with flavor. By the way, marrow is probably the first thing to get freezer burn. So if you're buying frozen bones, when you open up the pack, sniff the marrow. Give it a good smell. And if it smells freezer burn, go back to your butcher shop, go back to your grocery store, and say these bones are freezer burned. Don't even try to cook with them. They're going to stink up your house. Okay. So the freshness of the marrow will tell you a lot. The taste of the marrow, as I said, is delicious, and it is really very good for you. And unless you work with bones, you never get to experience it. The average American never gets to experience marrow butter, marrow and herbs just spread on a piece of bread or on potatoes. Oh, really good with like French fries or fried potatoes. So good. You take those buns and they'll have, like I said, a little bit of meat on there. Everything will be nice and brown and caramelized. Put that in a stock pot with water. You don't add salt to this. You never add salt to your stock. You only add salt when you're cooking with stock. Your roasted bones and your vegetable scraps in a nice big pot of cold water. Bring it up to a low boil. Turn it down to a simmer. You can add to this herbs. Very traditional would be an onion, a fresh onion, sliced, and in the slices you stick a couple of bay leaves and kind of tack them in place with cloves. The flavor of onion, bay, and clove is phenomenal, actually. It's just one of the classic flavors. It's not going to taste, I mean, the clove actually really complements everything. The bay's not overpowering. It's not going to taste overly spicy or, it's not going to taste of clove really in the final product. You might want to add to it another very classic combination, which would be some leek, the green leaves of leek. They're a little tough. They're a little bitter to cook or put in a salad or just, eat by themselves. They're usually trimmed off. Save back some of that leek and put it together with a little bay leaf and thyme. Thyme should always go in there. Thyme is such a wonderful flavor. Thyme is an overlooked herb. It's actually got some great medicinal qualities. It's expectorant, it's antiseptic and antiviral, and it enhances the flavor of food. Um, Thyme and parsley are probably the two herbs that enhance the flavor of food more than just about anything else. And yes, I would not hesitate to throw into that pot some parsley, a nice bunch of fresh parsley. Throw in some celery leaves. I always think it's nice to have some celery leaves in there. You can tailor it to your taste. You can use the herbs and spices that you like, and always a nice handful or so, a tablespoon of peppercorns, black peppercorns. Throw them in there, okay? Let that thing simmer. In the old days, there was always going to be a stock pot on the back of the stove, and that thing would simmer for days. In classical French cooking, they're going to tell you to simmer that pot for at least 24 hours. In the modern kitchen, that's rarely practical. I mean, energy, gas, natural gas, or electricity is very expensive. In the old days when they were cooking in a fireplace or a wood-fired stove, it was going to stay hot through the night. I have found, and I know this will be considered heresy to some, this is the way my grandmother did it because she did her cooking on an electric stove for most of my life. She would turn the pot on, low simmer while she was in the kitchen, while she was doing stuff. At night, turn it off and just leave it alone, walk away from it, come back in the morning, bring it back up to a boil to keep it from spoiling, and let it simmer again for a few hours. Now, in the home kitchen, we are rarely going to cook this down to a glaze, right? But after it has simmered for several hours, and as it does, the proteins essentially will rise to the top and form what they call like a scum. It's like little white, dirty looking bubbles. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a chemical process. Skim that out as you go. When you are satisfied with your stock, and you'll learn over time how many hours you really think it needs. The longer, the better, obviously. And a lot of times, in the wintertime, when I've got a fire going all the time, that's when I'm going to be making a lot of this stock. I will keep things frozen. I take vegetable scraps, I take bones, and just keep them in the freezer so that I can actually use that natural byproduct of heating the house to make my stock. But anyway, it's up to you. Okay. As with all things in cooking, it's up to you. Strain out all those herbs, strain out all the bone, strain out all the bits of meat. You taste the meat, you'll be amazed. I mean, the flavor of it has gone into the stock. There's very little left. So that's usually a treat for the dog, actually. I just pull all that meat scraps out of there and it goes into his food. And then you can freeze it. You can take say you had 3 or 5 gallons of stock, right? You simmered it down to about a gallon. You can put that in a gallon container and pop it in the freezer, but that's terribly inconvenient. You probably want to break this down into at least quart-size containers. Pint size would be even better. And some of it, put in some ice trays, get the old-fashioned ice trays and freeze them and take them out as cubes of stock. Put them in a freezer bag, like a Ziploc type bag. And whenever you just need a little bit of stock for a sauce, rather than thawing a whole quart of stock at a time, you can take one or two of these ice cubes. This becomes the base for everything. Now, I just told you how to do essentially a stock out of beef bones, right? You can do the same thing with chicken bones. You will want chicken stock. So, I mean, that anytime you roast a chicken, anytime you eat chicken, save those bones and do it the exact same way I just described for beef and make a chicken stock. You will use chicken stock probably more commonly than any kind of stock. If you're into ducks and geese, I do those separately. They have a different flavor from chicken. Turkey to me has a different flavor than chicken. I do not mix turkey and chicken stock, but whenever I have my Thanksgiving turkey at my Christmas turkey. I like turkey, so I actually eat a lot of turkey. I always make some turkey stock. Fish make an excellent stock. Take all your fish bones and do them the exact same way I just said, but you can also throw in the heads and tails. Shrimp shells are one of my favorite stocks. Now, they are very strong scent when they are simmering. If you are one that is not like really seafood, strong smells, you may want to shy away a little bit from shrimp stock, but don't. Okay, both shrimp and crawfish, lobster, crab, the shells make incredibly rich, wonderful stocks that are incredibly good for you. Shrimp shells, for instance, the reason they turn red or pink or whatever, and crawfish and all this, when they're boiled, is because they contain astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is a very powerful antioxidant. And when you make your shrimp or other shellfish broth, you can get the astaxanthin that otherwise you couldn't get. You would be wasting it. You'd be not utilizing it. You would use, fish stocks in all kinds of fish soups, fish stews, sauces for fish, etc. When I go fishing, especially surf fishing at the beach in wintertime and it's cold and everything, the first thing I do when I get down to the coast is I get some fresh local shrimp and I'll go out with my cast net and I'll do a little crabbing and basically essentially whatever I catch that isn't big enough for a meal, like if I just have one or two blue crab or a few small fish that again would not make a meal. I will take the fish and poach it, take the meat off the bone and reserve it, etc. But I will make essentially a shrimp stock with fish, and then it becomes a real soup. When I'm adding the meat back in, I've got a stock and a broth combined. But I'll add to that corn and onions and tomatoes, white wine, herbs, a lot of hot pepper, black pepper, and it's this warming soup that I eat every morning before I go out fishing, and it's fantastic. It's also what I eat when I come in from lunch and I'm freezing. These soups are so good. You cannot buy them. And the basis of every one of those is a stock. And when you're having that stock, you're getting all those benefits of bone broth. You are getting for the joint support, you're getting the skin and eye support, you're getting good immune support. The herbs you can put in there have medicinal values. And really, you're not wasting anything because you put in there your bones, you put in there, whether it's shrimp shells or whatever, stuff that would be thrown away, right? You put in there your vegetable scraps, and you're getting every bit of nutrition. Save back like the stems from parsley to go in there. You can take that stock, and like I said, you can make any soup. It's so good to cook rice in a stock like that. Really good. In fact, that's one of my favorite things is rice cooked in a good stock. You can put some in with your grits if you're Southern and you like a good stone ground grits for breakfast. Try cooking with stock instead of water. It is absolutely delicious. And of course, all the sauces and all that. And as I said, boiling meat in water makes a broth. Well, take that stock, use it for the base of your soup, and you're boiling meat in your stock, and that's really what a soup is, if you want to think about it that way. Or, I mean, of course, you can add cream, and you can add milk, and you can add all whatever you like. Really, absolutely delicious. Just the other day, someone got in touch and found some chicken in the woods mushrooms, and he said, how do I prepare it? Of course, I said, go ahead and saute them in butter because it's the obvious start for any mushroom. Mushrooms love being sauteed in butter. But you can also kind of roast those up and you can put them in, say, a chicken stock with some green onions, some ginger, make it a little hot pepper, make it, nice and spicy, some garlic, the mushrooms, the chicken in the woods mushrooms in there. And it makes sort of an Asian style, almost like a wonton soup type flavored soup that is just mind blowing. I mean, it's so good. So that's one of the foundations of cooking. Start by making stock. You start by making stock, you get all the health benefits of bone broth. You do it in a way where you can cook up a big batch at once, have it in the freezer. You've got stock to last throughout the year. You're not wasting food, which I believe is basically a sin. You are getting all those nutrients for your health. You can tailor them with whatever meat, whatever fish, whatever herbs you have on hand so that you can actually eat a different soup every day. Or if, if you're not feeling so well, you can just have a cup of stock, just a clear cup of stock. You can make your own consommes by cooking them down and clearing them. You can make your demi-glace. You will find a million ways to use these. They cost essentially nothing because you're using scraps. Think about that. High-end cooking, and it costs essentially nothing. And it will change your entire view of cooking. It will make your cooking almost 100% better. And you'll never buy stuff out of a can again, or even a carton. These stocks and broths that they sell in the store, I don't care what chef endorses them, they will never compare to what you can make for yourself at home. And even if you had to buy the bones and stuff, you're talking a couple of dollars for, a gallon, 2 gallons that you will use for months, literally. So I guess the only other caveat is if you're going to do pork, always do pork separately. Pork has a porky flavor. I actually really love pork stock with beans. I save, especially when I'm cooking barbecue and I've got these nice smoky flavored bones, save them. And when I'm ready to make a big old pot of beans, I make some pork stock, and then I cook the beans in the pork stock with a lot of onion, maybe stir a little cornmeal in there, serve it with some fresh chopped onions and hot sauce, and man, that's a good thing of beans. And speaking of adding a little bit of a grain to a stock, I already talked about how you can cook rice with stock. You can do larger amounts of stock and smaller amounts of rice and do, rice is an additive to a soup. But very traditional, especially in Western Europe, is barley, beef broth and barley, or beef stock and barley. It makes a good winter soup and really good for when you're sick, for invalids. Chicken soup is always going to be classic, but so is beef and barley because it just goes so well in the stomach. It fills you up. And if you're really sick, cornmeal in that stock, it's called gruel, and for centuries, that was the food for sick people, and it really does help settle the stomach, and it's nutritive, and a very good thing to do. So, cooking begins with stock. Never forget. uh, there's an old French saying that cooking begins with the breaking of an egg. I say no. Cooking begins with stock. All right, so now let's get into the herbs. And as I said, the herb for this week is goldenrod. And basically, wherever you live, you're going to have goldenrod unless maybe you're in the deserts. It's always different. But goldenrod, there's so many varieties that grow in the United States, that grow throughout North America. Most common around here is the canadensis, the goldenrod that was first discovered in Canada. Well, goldenrod has beautiful yellow flowers. I mean, it's sort of a long stalk of a weedy plant with pointed pinnate leaves and these yellow flowers. And right now, on a fall day, the leaves have just barely started changing. The fields and the meadows are just full of goldenrod, and it truly is one of the most beautiful wildflowers. It just paints our fall landscape like nothing else. But people think it causes allergies. It doesn't for most people, as I said. Now, goldenrod has been used in herbal medicine for centuries. We're going back to, German folk medicine, monastic medicine. Goldenrod was part of what they would have in the apothecary. It was an herb that Europeans knew when they came to America. It was, it's common. When I say common goldenrod, I may be talking about any of a couple of dozen varieties, but it's a commonly used herb. So that's actually where I'm going with that. It was used by Native Americans as well as, the British settlers and the French and the Portuguese, and everybody had goldenrod and everybody knew about goldenrod. Gerard was a British herbalist in the 1500s. He found it to be one of the best herbs to treat wounds as a poultice and to help stop bleeding. Use that really people have forgotten about, but in his time, it was one that they would grab hold of. Culpeper, writing, I say, about 100 years later, said that it was specifically good for the kidneys, for gravel, for kidney stones, urinary stones, gallstones, but especially the kidneys as a diuretic. He said it would produce urine in abundance. And whereby the gravel and stone may be voided. Remember, this is England in the 1600s, so they had a different way of talking than we do now with English. They used English. He said the decoction of the herb, green or dry, or distilled water thereof, is very effectual for inward bruises, internal wounds and bruises. Um, the bloody flux, that's bloody diarrhea. Yes, I know it's pretty nasty, but if it ever happens to you, you want to stop it right away. And goldenrod is quite effective. For women's courses, he's talking menstruation, and is no less prevalent in ruptures, burstings, or in ruptures or burstings, he's talking hernias, being drunk inwardly and outwardly applied. So he would use it both as a tea and as a poultice. And that's actually the exact same way Native Americans use goldenrod, as a tea and a poultice for diarrhea, for colds, for wounds, both internal and external. He said it was good for green wounds, old sores, and ulcers. He said they were quickly cured therewith. And he also recommended it being made into a lotion or a salve for old sores and ulcerated wounds, and especially sores of the mouth and throat, or the privy parts, as he called them, the genitals. The herb was still very popular in the 1930s. Miss Grieve said it was aromatic, stimulant, carminative. So by stimulant, she meant stimulating digestion, and carminative, she essentially meant that it settled the stomach. She said that it was part of a famous Swiss herbal formula at that time called, I think, Faltrank, I don't know. As an astringent and a diuretic for kidney stones and bladder stones. And she even gives an instance that said it was recorded in 1788 that a boy of 10, after taking this infusion for some months, that would be a tea of this, passed 15 large stones weighing 1¼ ounces and 50 over the size of a pea. That kid was in bad shape. I can't, first of all, I can imagine how painful that must have been, but that was a 10-year-old that was nearing kidney failure. Now, that's a pretty extreme case. So in 1788, a tea essentially made of, I'm assuming this is goldenrod along with a couple of other herbs, because she had just mentioned that Swiss formula. So we can assume it's goldenrod along with probably parsley, maybe catgrass, a few other herbs that were widely used, especially in Switzerland and Germany, for kidney stones. We'll have to look into that and find the exact formula, but I would assume those two herbs at least were part of it. But mainly based on goldenrod, 50 key-sized stones and 15 weighing 1¼ ounce each. That is absolutely incredible. I think in our era, a doctor would have looked at him and probably tried surgery and maybe even just given up on him. So definitely worth knowing that for stones, for gravel, as they used to call it. And she mentions that a powder of goldenrod was good for old ulcerated sores and could be used as a diaphoretic in a warm infusion. Now, I told you that goldenrod is often used for cold. Diaphoretic helps break a fever, and that's one of the traditional uses of goldenrod on all the continents where it's been used. It's been used for colds. Helpful in dysmenorrhea, that's again menstrual issues, amenorrhea, and good for diphtheria. So, goldenrod, as I said, very popular in German folk medicine and the monastic medicine that was really codified in the German tradition. Father Johann Kunzel said, "You will find this perennial, often a meter high, with yellow flowers in deforested places." Yeah, I mean, it likes meadows, it likes open areas. It's not going to grow in the deep woods, although you do sometimes find goldenrod growing in shady areas. That grew in Austria, where he lived, was one that grew where trees had been cut down. He said it was good for the croup, sore throats, bladder ailments, light diarrhea, sleeplessness, but for the internal use, one should also add the same amount of juniper berries or common centaury. Take half a cup 5 times a day. He said the dry herb used as a poultice was good for the same diseases externally. So again, he's saying do tea and externally. And the juniper berries are also very good for colds and viruses. They can be good for bladder and kidney stones to a point. They have resins that can actually irritate the kidneys if used in large amounts over a long period of time. But juniper berries, uh, really traditional in German folk medicine. Father Kunzel has a whole regimen he recommended people do every spring of eating juniper berries to support the immune system and help detoxify the system. And I've tried it. My friend Jolanta Wittib, with whom I co-wrote the Herbs and Weeds of Father Johann Kunzel, she swears by it. We both find it very pleasant because juniper berries are very tasty and effective spring tonic. But again, if you have weak kidneys, if you have kidney inflammation, you want to be especially careful of using juniper berries. Continuing in the German folk tradition, Brother Aloysius said that goldenrod was used for ulcerations of the throat, ulcerated mouth, and for loose teeth. It actually would help tighten it, slightly astringent. It would help tighten the teeth. For fistulas, throat infections, neck complaints, croup, bladder and kidney complaints, blocked spleen, jaundice, dropsy, old sores, blood spitting, diarrhea, rotting gums even, dysentery, scrofula, asthma, swellings, insomnia, coughing, chronic catarrh, which is congestion, with much expectoration, chronic pain in the sides, back pain, diabetes, to break up stones and facilitate urination, and especially for women following birth. That is a huge number of remedies for one common plant that we think of as a weed. The goldenrod also contains vitamin C. So when he's talking about loose teeth and rotting gums, he would be talking about scurvy. Scurvy is caused by a vitamin C deficiency. So it is one of the herbs that has traditionally been used for such issues that hopefully we don't experience very much these days. But back then when people had trouble storing fresh food through the winter, and maybe at sea on long voyages for months at a time, scurvy was a very real issue. Um, Maria Trebin, Austrian herbalist writing in the 70s and 80s, she loved goldenrod. It was one of her go-to herbs. She said the flowers are gathered from July through October, and around here they're a little more later in the year, but she was in a much higher elevation, so right now is the time to gather them, in my region at least, and are used for bleeding of the intestines, especially though goldenrod is praised as an excellent remedy for disorders of the kidneys. Flowers and leaves of goldenrod have a cooling effect, and since the plant is diuretic, are recommended in all kidney and bladder complaints. Goldenrod, together with bedstraw and yellow or white dead nettle, is efficacious in cases of cirrhosis of the kidneys and renal failure when renal dialysis has to be performed. In these cases, I was able to help using the above mentioned herbs a 52-year-old man suffering from cirrhosis of the kidneys. He came to see me, puffing and sweating heavily. He climbed the stairs to the first floor where I live. Fighting for breath, he fell into a chair. A week after having drunk 3 cups of tea made with the aforementioned herb mixture, he felt a lot better. He used only fresh herbs, and after the third week, he was free of this complaint. Now, I'm going to run through those herbs again because this is all too common, especially in our era where people have used a lot of methamphetamine and a lot of prescription drugs as well. The kidneys can be very strongly affected. And of course, we have major problems with diabetes, and a lot of people have to go on dialysis. So I think it is very well worth spending a moment on this. She said, goldenrod with bedstraw. That's later bedstraw. I believe that's gallium. Very common weed. There's some growing in my driveway right now. Very good herb. Yellow or white dead nettle. Dead nettle is another of those weeds that people are always trying to get out of their lawn. Has a very long use in German folk medicine. Could be that these herbs are exactly what Miss Grieve was referring to as a Swiss formula. Well, Miss Trevin being in Austria would have been using very similar herbs and formula. So again, it's goldenrod with bedstraw and yellow or white dead nettle, efficacious for the cirrhosis of the kidneys and renal failure when dialysis has to be performed. Write that down, stick it back, do a little research on it for yourself. It could make a world of difference one day. If you've ever known someone who had to be on dialysis, it is incredibly painful and takes an incredible toll on their system, and it doesn't cure anything. It just keeps them going a while longer. So, very good to know. She said that all of our emotions are worked off through the kidneys. Now, that's an old concept, very common in many cultures, though, that our emotions have an effect on the kidneys, the liver, etc. She said, therefore, they are most affected after emotional shock, be it a death in the family or another accident. Goldenrod proves its worth as a medicinal plant which influences human emotions most favorably. It should therefore be drunk without delay in cases of disappointments or emotional stress. Now, that may seem a little far-fetched us these days, but I can attest that this concept that was believed in German folk medicine was also believed by the ancient Greeks, or the humors and their system of ancient medicine, strongly believed in traditional Chinese medicine. Chinese medicine certainly associates certain moods, certain traumas, certain events as having an effect on kidneys. In different qigong routines, there are various note is intoned and a color visualized, along with taking certain herbs to help, say, the liver. If you are an angry person, they say it has irritated your liver. The kidneys, the lungs, even. I remember white is the color for the lungs. Anyway, that's a strong concept in traditional Chinese medicine. I have heard the exact same concept um, spoken of, written of by Native American herbalists in various tribes. Most recently, it was Tismal Crow. Tismal Crow, he's Muskogee, if I remember correctly. He, an herbalist, a medicine man, as they call it, definitely believed that different emotional states had a role in affecting different organs of the body. Well, in the Anglo-American tradition, if we want to look at it that way, we may say that someone could die of heartbreak, sadness, death, and we know that to be true. It can definitely affect the heart. So while it's an old-fashioned concept, very, very common among many cultures in many different parts of the world, and herbalism has had a role really in helping with emotional issues for that very reason. And goldenrod is one that is particularly good for the kidneys. And as Ms. Trevin said, shock and sadness are believed by many cultures to affect the kidneys. And, it's not that hard to understand. If you have weak kidneys, okay, weak kidneys means your kidneys don't hold fluids quite as long, and you will have lower blood pressure. When you have low blood pressure, you start to faint when you stand up too fast, right? But if you've ever had low blood pressure, and being a very tall person, I experienced it growing up. I think most people over 6 feet tall do experience this. When the weather changes and the barometric pressure changes, it affects the blood pressure. If you have weak kidneys, your kidneys are almost like a barometer. You know when the weather's changing, and you will begin to feel tired. You'll begin to feel weak. You will probably begin to feel very melancholy and sad. Why is that? Well, scientifically, it's just blood pressure. And if we take, say, licorice to help our kidneys retain a little more fluid, we're far less affected by the change in weather, the drop in barometric pressure. I need to state that licorice can raise the blood pressure and should not be used by people who have high blood pressure, especially if they tend to be kind of red-faced, big, beefy people. But also, it shouldn't be used in high doses or long periods of time. But for a short period of time, we can strengthen the kidneys and the lungs and a few other things with licorice. It's a good antiviral as well. So it's not that far out, really. It actually makes sense from a physiological. Again, keep that in mind that after a shock or a trauma, uh, goldenrod tea might actually help one recover. It might help with emotional stress, especially sadness and disappointments and such as that. And she said that we feel the soothing effect of this plant almost like a calming and caressing hand in severe cases of emotional stress. Even the sight of goldenrod in nature has a quieting effect on us. We should be thankful that there grows a plant around us which can bring us such comfort. And as I said, it is one of the prettiest plants. I love just, going out on a drive through the mountains this time of year and just seeing the goldenrod and the leaves starting to turn orange and red. And it's um, it's a beautiful time of year. I mean, especially in the mountains of North Carolina, it's absolutely gorgeous. People flock here by the millions every year to see our mountains painted in these just incredible colors. And, again, I'll mention, the human being has a much different spectrum of the eye. Essentially, all that color was created by God for us. Most of the other animals don't see it the way we do. We can actually find divine intention in the beauty of nature. But moving on to more modern sources. Peterson Field Guide for Eastern Medicinal Plants, my favorite field guide, the one I take with me whenever I go out, specifically says of Canada goldenrod, Solidago canadensis, the one I have so much of around my house. They said American Indians used the root for burns, flowers for fever, snake bites, crushed flowers chewed for sore throats. The herb contains quercetin, a compound reportedly useful in treating hemorrhagic nephritis. Sweet goldenrod, which is Solidago odorata, which has a sweeter scent to it, hence the name. The leaf tea is pleasant tasting. This tea has been used by Native Americans and early Americans, trappers and such, as a foraged tea for hundreds of years, and it is one of the nicest teas you will make a camp or a campfire in the woods. Okay, it is just really very nice, and I think Monarda bee balm. Also very nice. You can find usually some leaves of that about the same time the goldenrod is out, and that's one of my favorite combinations for those two together. And both actually very powerful and medicinal herbs. Anyway, they say it's formerly used as a digestive stimulant, diuretic, mild astringent, for colic, to regulate menses, for stomach cramps, cold, cough, fevers, dysentery, diarrhea, measles, and externally as a wash for rheumatism, neuralgia, and headache. Think of that next time you disparage the lowly goldenrod. And in the early American tradition, the Thomsonians were very fond of goldenrod, especially the canadensis. Thomsonian System of Medicine was a book written somewhere around 1900. The author said this herb may be found common among pine plains and hedges. I don't need to tell you all that. You know what goldenrod is. But he said that Solidago, this goldenrod, is very valuable. It cures quickly and completely. It may be used alone in a hot infusion, that's a tea, you probably know, or in combination with other suitable agents. In typhoid fever, it stimulates and cleanses the alveolar mucous membrane very successfully. In bronchial congestion and pneumonia and such, he said it was of much value, especially when added to other agents influencing the respiratory organs. In other words, he means used in a tea with other herbs that help the lungs. And currently, Plants for Future says that goldenrod is a safe and gentle remedy for a number of disorders. In particular, it is a valuable astringent remedy in treating wounds and bleeding, whilst it is particularly useful in the treatment of urinary tract disorders. I forgot to tell you, goldenrod is very good for bladder infections and cystitis. It's also very good for irritable bowel syndrome. I'm not sure if they're going to mention that or not. It is one of about three herbs, I would say, yarrow, taken cold, Canada fleabane, I think it's a origeron, and goldenrod are very good for IBD, I think they call it. Anyway, irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disease, even colitis, Very good. It's astringent and helps pull some of the inflammation out and keep things from flaring up. The They say it's also good for nephritis, and that's associated with kidney disease. The plant contains saponins that are antifungal and act specifically against the Candida fungus, which is the cause of vaginal and oral thrush. It also contains rutin, which is used to treat capillary fragility, and phenologic glycosides, which are anti-inflammatory. The leaves and flowering tops are anthelmintic, anti-inflammatory, antiseptic, aromatic, astringent, carminative, diaphoretic, mildly diuretic, febrifuge, and stimulant. I think I've covered those words so many times, I probably don't have to define them. Um, let's see, is there anything? All right, anthelmintic, that's going to help get rid of intestinal parasites. Anti-inflammatory is obvious. Antiseptic is obvious. Um, Aromatic is obvious, actually. Astringent, carminative, I already mentioned, helps settle the stomach. Diaphoretic helps break a fever. Uh, well, basically, so does febrifuge. Two different functions for basically solving the same problem. Diuretic means it helps get rid of excess fluids, stimulates urination. Digestive stimulant, I think we know all that. It's a vulnerary herb. Vulnerary means wound healing. It has proved especially useful when used internally in treatment of urinary infections, chronic catarrh, skin diseases, influenza, whooping cough, bladder and kidney stones. Due to its mild action, goldenrod is used to treat gastroenteritis in children. It makes an excellent mouthwash in the treatment of thrush. And let's see, it's also used in a couple of homeopathic remedies, especially for kidney and bladder disorders, rheumatism, and arthritis. So, once again, this is so often the case with dandelion and plantain and dead nettle, as we mentioned earlier. One of the most hated weeds for no apparent reason, usually because of a false association with allergies that are caused by ragweed. Goldenrod is considered a weed. Well, it's actually one of the most beautiful wildflowers. It's one of our most useful herbs that grows on nearly every continent and has been used by Native American, British, Celtic, Slavic. Yes, it's used very much in Slavic cultures. The Polish medicine uses goldenrod a whole lot. As I said, Celtic, the Irish and the Scots and Welsh and such, very big fans of goldenrod. Germanic, Roman, Greek, African, Asian, Arab, etc. All the herbal traditions of the world have found wonderful uses for goldenrod, value it as a medicinal herb, and we think of it as a weed. And when you stop doing that, if for no other reason, it's such a pretty plant. Just go out somewhere today where you can get a nice view of a meadow or a pasture, maybe a little creek meandering through a cow pasture with goldenrod growing all around it, and just take it in. It is also believed, as I said, how, the organs can be affected by emotions, that mental states, the mood and such, can be affected by colors of nature. St. Hildegard von Bingen believed that the green grasses and trees were just seeing them and enjoying them are one of the best things we could do for our health. And, I certainly think that as well. I cannot stand being in cities at all. If I am, I have to find a park. And my entire life, I've just wanted to be in the woods. And thank God I've been able to orient my career around doing the thing I love most, which is really being in the woods, on the water, um, and gathering things I can use to cook delicious food. Really, I mean, I've combined a lot of my passions thanks to y'all. Thanks for you buying my books. So I appreciate that more than you'll ever know. And every day, every single day, probably 5 times a day or more, I pray that God will bless every one of you. So y'all have a wonderful week and do enjoy the fall colors. No, just gorgeous. And make some stock. Have a good cup of, nice warm soup on a chilly day, and that certainly makes life much more pleasant and enjoyable, and it'll make you a lot healthier too. It'll support your immune system and your joints and all your systems through the change of the seasons, which Actually, it can affect us quite a bit. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time. Remember, my book's available either directly through me or at Amazon.com. Published 8 books so far and already working on the ninth. So have a good time telling you about that one, maybe in a couple of months. Have a great week. I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.